Welcome to Your Infinite Health. Are you getting older?
Are you feeling it?
How would you like to do that in reverse?
We're your host,
Dr. Tripp
and LeNae.
We've run an integrative medicine practice for 13 years.
Together, we have 60 years of combined experience helping clients.
We've helped tens of thousands achieve success in health and live longer, happier lives.
In this show, we'll cover peer-reviewed and evidence-based integrative approaches to creating the health you've always wanted.
We also share professional experience we see in the field every day.
So if you're ready to feel, look, and live your best life, you're in the right place.
Welcome to Your Infinite Health podcast.
Hey guys, LeNae here. I promised Tripp will be here, but you know me, I got tired of waiting on him and wanted to jump in and introduce you to the guest that we're going to be having on today. I think you're going to love this one. We're going to be talking to Christopher Lee Maher, who is a retired U.S. Navy SEAL, best-selling author, and holistic wellness pioneer. Christopher Lee Maher is regarded as the unparalleled authority in stress resolution, healing, personal evolution, and longevity. His journey mirrors the tenacity of many elite athletes, initially grappling with intermittent joint discomfort that swiftly evolved into a symphony of pain, touching every joint from feet to lower back and neck. He was headed for the precipice of a full-fledged hip replacement. This extreme stress caused Christopher's hearing to wane and his vision to dim, compelling him to read lips for communication. Amidst unyielding adversity, Christopher dedicated himself to seeking out the answers that would help him alleviate his discomfort. His self-healing journey began with the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine and Yusan University, where the tapestry of traditional Chinese medicine practices interwove with Western science and pathology. After a transformative decade under the tutelage of Grandmaster Mantak Chia at Thailand's Universal Teo Master School, Christopher realized the power of what he had learned and made it his mission to guide others through the fog of accumulated stress in their lives. Christopher's profound wisdom birthed the holistic paradigm, true body intelligence technology, a fusion of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual enlightenment. His guidance garnered success in luminaries throughout sports, entertainment, commerce, medicine, and global diplomacy. Rooted in Los Angeles, California, Christopher orchestrates metamorphosis from his sanctuary. His revolutionary methodologies dissects precognitive subconscious stress imprints, effecting instantaneous and lasting transformations of the physical and spiritual self, and helps them transcend the original root causes of their pain, trauma, and stress. Thank you so much for joining us, Christopher.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait to really get into your topic. But before we get into the meat of that, can you tell our listeners, so I see you were a Navy SEAL. Can you talk about like what even drove you into becoming a Navy SEAL? What was that experience like? And how'd you bounce out?
I was at a friend's house and I was helping his mom move from their farmhouse to this new house that they bought. And in the basement was this biannual magazine about SEAL training and the SEAL teams. And I picked it up and there were these guys on the cover running down the beach with these telephone poles on their shoulders, grimacing, okay? And I looked at that and I thought, wow, that looks
fun.
like the ultimate challenge, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's what I needed at the time. You know, I just quit college and I just sold my business. I was running a sandwich shop called the Hoagie King out of a coal mining town in Pennsylvania, Shenandoah.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought, man, I need something. There's got to be more to life than this. And that answered the call for me. So
How old were you?
I was 19.
Oh, young. Business owner, 19. That's nice.
Yeah, I was 19. And, you know, when you're getting up at 4:35 in the morning to go pick up cold cuts, at some point when you're 19, that gets really old really, really fast.
Sure.
You know, and you're dealing with, you know, I was close to an industrial park. And we had the late night drunks coming in, serving them sandwiches and pizza and gravy on fries. And then at some point you're like, this is not it. This isn't the vision I was having when I was daydreaming in high school.
Mm.
So when I saw that picture and then I read through the rest of the magazine, within 2 weeks, I was at the recruiter's office. Within 4 months, I was out the door.
Wow. And well, you had already been getting up early, so
Yeah.
boot camp must have been no problem for you.
Yeah, and they definitely pushed that envelope as far open as you can get it, right?
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it was, how do I say it? I was really young and I needed something to push me. Now, once I got into SEAL training and the SEAL teams, I realized everybody had a different motivation, right? Some guys wanted to skydive for free. Some guys wanted to shoot cool guns. Other guys wanted to prove their dads wrong. Like, I wasn't there to show someone that I was important. I just knew that I wanted to be challenged physically, mentally, and emotionally.
And then, so how long were you in the Navy SEALs?
So I was in the Navy for 8 years, and I was in the Naval Special Warfare community for 7 years.
Wow. And so what does that involve exactly?
What does that involve? That involves, you go through SEAL training, and it took me a while to get through SEAL training because was injured and that I was diagnosed incorrectly as being epileptic.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to go through this whole process of meeting with it's called a physical evaluation board, and dealing with this doctor named Dr. Catron, who he himself never made it through SEAL training and was looking to make sure that no one else made it either. And I had to
Wow.
sort of figure out a strategy to go behind his back and get another MD to read my test that they had taken. And she didn't. And I went to the physical evaluation board, told them the entire story right in front of him. And they said, son, you're dismissed. Why don't you go back to SEAL training? And Captain Catron, why don't you stay here? We're going to have another conversation.
Oh.
And so I got through that. And the SEAL teams is, how do I say it? It's work hard and play harder, right? And you're up all hours of the night because in SEAL teams, our job is conducted when it's dark out, right? Because we have to use the element of surprise because we are a very small tactical force. So in a platoon, there's only 16 guys in a platoon. And so when you get tasked with an operation, then you have to ready yourself. And, it's fun in the sense that every week or 2 weeks, you're doing something very different. You could be in Puerto Rico doing diving. A month later, you could be doing close quarters battle in Korea. All the training is really, really amazing. So when you walk across the stage and they give you that diploma, at that point that you're in charge of your own life, right? And I think probably something that's missing in society for young men is this honoring, this shepherding them from being a boy into being a man, right? From being irresponsible to being responsible.
Well,
And
that's
once you have that as a man,
that's an interesting point. Exactly. How does how does that shepherding thing work?
yeah, I think it's it's a rite of passage. I think young men have to be challenged, and there needs to be consequences for either your rebellion or your confusion or your absent-mindedness. And you need to do that under circumstances, one, that are safe, but also that stretch you and sort of force you to grow up, right? And SEAL training does that.
So you were 28 when you completed your.
Yeah, I was 27 technically, but
Still really young.
yeah.
And was it the physicality and the psychological intensity of going through that program and being a part of that team? Is that where your health issues developed?
Yeah, those definitely developed there because one, how to say it, if you look at stress, right? There's two basic categories. There's lifetime accumulated stress, and then there's daily accumulated stress. Well, in SEAL training, because they're piling so much stress on you every day, well, within a 24-hour period, you're never able to recover from the stress that you took in that day. So the next day, so Tuesday is full of Monday's unresolved stress. Wednesday is full of a little bit of Mondays and Tuesdays, right? Because sometimes, we might be in bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, we're up at 4:30, and we grinded hard all day long. So there's no way that, 4.5 hours of sleep is going to be sufficient enough in order to recover fully. So each day I was in the habit of pouring in more stress than I was taking out of my system. And so your sleep's job is to do what? It's to recover from all the stress that you put in the 16 hours before, right? And so when you're always behind on sleep and your activity level's higher than you can recover from, then what's going to happen? Your body's going to start accumulating more and accumulating more and accumulating more and accumulating more. And then eventually systems in your body are going to say, hey, bud, this doesn't work for me, because the body will push back if you overload it. And once you go through something like SEAL training, you don't have an off button. You have a button, and the button is always on, right? So even after you get out of the SEAL training and the SEAL teams and you enter back into society, your foot's always pushing the gas to full throttle, because that's what you know. That's become your normality.
It's your muscle memory, so to speak.
Yeah, the muscle memory, but really the nervous system, right?
I said that as kind of in a larger sense.
Yeah.
It becomes the norm for you.
Yeah, because once you charge the nervous system is causing your adrenal glands to produce adrenaline at the same measure every single day. And so that adrenaline, when you wake up, it's already kicked in. And so now you're looking for things in the outer world that match the adrenal and cortisol levels that you're used to on a daily basis.
Is that what drove you into pursuing the Olympics?
Yeah, I think the thing that I thought is, once I got out of SEAL training and the SEAL teams, I looked over my life and assessed it, and I thought, when was everything going the best? And it was the best always when I was being athletic. And so I thought, well, why don't we pick a goal and head in that direction, and let's see what happened. And so I chose the Olympic trials, got a coach, went back to school, joined a team, and went full throttle. The challenge is that I was still in the SEAL team mindset. And so I thought you could train hard all day, every day, when you're doing sophisticated athletic performance. And you can't. You can push that way when you're doing grunt work, because you're not required to race. And when you're racing, your body has to have a certain level of rest. And I never had that. So I was still, going to school full time. I was running a business full time, and I was training for the Olympic trials full time. And then I had a girlfriend. And so there was never any time to sort of sit back and relax. And, when you're training and running, even Saturdays and Sundays, those are still training days. And so I was always training. That's all I knew. I think I had over attached to my sense of what it was to be an athlete. And I had this image, and it became sort of an identity for me. And then my body said, look, I need you to break away from this identity. So if I need to break myself in order to get you to wake up and reach out and ask for help, then that's what I'm going to do. And because I was in SEAL training and SEAL teams, whenever I had pain, I was always overlooking the discomfort.
Wow.
Right? Because in SEAL training, they teach you, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. What does that mean? It means if you don't mind the discomfort, keep moving forward. It's okay. And once that becomes part of your identity as a young man, how do you get yourself out of that when your greatest achievement is driven by that strategy? And so that was very difficult.
Was the coach that you had for your Olympic training giving you a different perspective?
Was he giving me a different perspective? Manny? No, he wasn't giving me a different perspective. He was, I chose I approached every practice like it was a race, right? So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Well, we raced on Saturdays and Sundays. So by the time I got to the race, I was tuckered out. So I had
I can't
guys
imagine.
yeah, just, so I only had one speed. And you learn in order to survive in SEAL training, you have to learn how to push past what you believe is your threshold every day, because they pile a little more on every day. Like when you walk through the quarterdeck at SEAL training, it says the only easy day was yesterday. Now, in retrospect, I understand, but when I stepped in the door, I didn't truly understand what that meant. Well, if that's been how you've been living for, 7+ years, how do you get out of that?
And so
When you get
your body was telling you, right? Is
Yeah.
that at what point did you start to have the chronic musculoskeletal pain and loss of your
Oh,
hearing?
by 29.
Wow.
Yeah, by 29. Yeah, because my system had gotten so tight. And, I'd never heard of Chinese medicine. I never heard of yoga or, I'm from Pennsylvania. So and I was raised on a dairy farm. So I know what hard work is. And so you work hard and you go have a beer, right? It's pretty simple. So I kept that mindset. And those things didn't blend well together because I was dehydrating myself and I was overtraining constantly. I wasn't getting enough sleep. But on the outside, I still look like Adonis, right? So I'm still getting positive reflections from everybody. I'm still performing at a high level. And so when you're getting that positive recognition, you don't think anything wrong is going on. And so I just kept pushing through pain because that's the only thing that I knew.
And then what was the catalyst? What was the catalyst that pushed you into seeking out the Chinese medicine approach and whatnot?
Well, I wasn't smart enough to do that myself. So I got in a car accident, right? I was at a red light and a guy who was feeling nostalgic bought a car that he had in high school and he was fixing it up and he took it out for a drive, started at the top of a really tall hill, and then his brakes didn't work.
Oh my gosh.
And he came crashing through the stoplight and T-boned my car.
Oh no.
And then I had to go to the hospital. And then after that, everything that was buried underneath came straight up to the surface. And, knee pain for me is easy to ignore, and neck pain and stiffness, that stuff. But once it gets into the center of your hip, it's very difficult to ignore because it was like someone had an ice pick and at every 2 or 3 seconds, they were sending it right into the middle of my hip. And so I then, just had to bend the knee. It was too much.
So they wanted to, were you advised medically to have a hip replacement?
Oh, 1000%. Yeah, that was the only option for me. It was like, look, you've got to replace this thing. I was like, okay, that doesn't sound good. Well, you could just, watch an operation, and when you see what they use to cut the bone open, right? And I thought, yeah, no way this is ever going to happen. There must be another way. And so I got on my knees and, I prayed. And I kept praying every day that, something powerful would happen. And a guy that I went to boarding school with named Mark Pershpalaja, he sent me a link to a guy that was doing some stretching. And I thought, hey, I've got it covered. I'm doing Feldenkrais. I'm doing the Egoscue method. I'm doing hot yoga. I'm utilizing everything that I can to put my body back in balance. And I was grateful for all the practitioners that helped me. But what I really needed was I needed to go a mile. And the people that I was working with, they were able to take me an inch. Because when I got started on this path, there wasn't anything out there, right, that actually could answer the call. Because no one had applied, Newton's basic laws of forces directly proportional to the amount, changes directly proportional to the amount of force applied. So they were massaging me and attempting to go on my tissues, but your tissue can only handle so much force because you have nerve pain when they drive their elbows in. So I was doing Rolfing and and Heller work and anyone who could get in there and start moving some of this pain out of my system. And I learned to get used to receiving pain. And then at some point, I sat down with this guy and he started to teach me a few things, and it made a lot more sense. And within an hour and a half, 2 hours, all the pain at every joint was gone. On one end, I'm happy, but on the other end, I'm really kind of pissed off because now I'm 33 and I've spent all this time, I've spent all this energy, and I spent all this money. And he was able to sort me out in an hour and a half.
How did he do that exactly?
He did that by, he had some wild techniques. He had my leg in a ladder. He was standing on my back. I was, twisting in different positions. So basically the muscles were under maximal contraction and stretching simultaneously. And when that was happening, that maximal force was changing what are called bone rotational relationships. Well, what sits between your bones? Well, joints. So if the bones are rotated in the correct direction, which means that you have structural distortion, you're going to have an excessive amount of friction on your joints. And then that's going to lead to swelling, and that the surrounding swelling is going to push on the nerve tissue, which is going to give you the sensation of pain. So basically, we started reverse engineering, the tension that I had put in. And it was very uncomfortable. But in the end, when he was done, there was no pain left in my body.
That seems somewhat high risk, though.
No, it's not high risk because it's actually low risk. What's high risk is going to like a yoga class where you're not contracting your muscles at maximal contraction. And because you're not, you're putting all of your soft tissue at risk, right? Like most people don't hurt themselves when they're weight training because the muscle's under contraction. As long as the muscle's under contraction, it's safe. The contraction is what's protecting the muscle. It's when you get into these classes and you're overstretching and you're passively opening your muscles. Well, now, because you're passive, you're overstretching all that connective tissue. And that's when you are at risk for injury.
Tripp, you have a thought? Have anything?
Well, yeah, I guess typically a lot of the pain and things results from the fascia and the interconnectivity of the fascia and the ligaments that are surrounding the muscles and the connective tissue there. And I guess and like in whiplash victims, it sounds to me as though you had a horrific whiplash experience, and that subsequently actually activated all those. Maybe you had reached because of all of the stress and that over the course of your life, and maintaining those maximum outputs had consumed a lot of that reserve that you have, the stem cell reserve and all of those things that by virtue of the inflammation and all the stress that you've been putting yourself under. And, and it took somebody that was familiar with the technique to relax the tension and the inflammation and those ligaments and the connective tissue that you had. And somebody sounded like the guy was phenomenal. Quite frankly,
literally phenomenal.
Yeah, and a lot of times, in conventional medicine, I guess my background over the last decade or so has been doing prolotherapy and working with the musculoskeletal issues, using stem cells and things like that. And I guess when those things happen, the distribution of the pain is very, very similar to the nervous distribution, but in actuality, the pain is being caused by the ligaments and not by the nerves themselves. So it's the transmission of the damage and the injuries there that actually get transmitted via the nervous system. And the distribution is so similar that many orthopedic surgeons and sports medicine physicians, not being aware, they'll think, well, this is because of nerve compression or nerve damage. And it sounds like your practitioner there was already aware of all of that and was able to guide you out of that morass, so to speak,
Yes,
with his
word.
experience. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. It's a phenomenal story. I love it.
And when you get out of that, you're not only does that impact you physiologically and structurally, it impacts you emotionally and psychologically. So the greatest part of that was when I left and went to the airport for the first time in about 7 years, I had people bumping into me. Where before, people, when I walked through an airport anywhere in the public, they stepped directly out of my way because they could feel that intensity. They could feel that energy from SEAL training and the SEAL teams.
Interesting.
Like I've had NFL linebackers that saw me, and as soon as I was walking towards them, they just stepped right out of the way from the intensity. But as soon as that stress load was brought to neutrality, everyone was bumping into me. And I was like, what's going on? Am I like a pinball inside of a pinball machine? Like I would sit down on a flight, and whoever had their arms on the armrest, if they were there before me, they would just pull their arms in. And now they were like, this is my armrest. And I was like, oh, okay. And on flights, people would never talk to me. And then suddenly everyone wanted to blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what is going on? Like this, and am I like in the Truman Show? Like, and everything here is shifted. So once I realized that, then I had to call them up and go, hey, listen, I want you to understand there are psychological and emotional impacts to the pain that was resolved. And I went back to my class that I teach. It was a Wednesday night women's class. And I always got there 15 minutes before them, and I set up this whole little fitness course for them to do. And I got there, and, they were standing around, and I said, hey, listen, what would you ladies like to do tonight? And they were looking at me very confused, like with their dogs, like dogs with their heads turned to the side.
Right. Dogs tilted.
And they were like,
Are you right?
who's this guy asking us what we want to do? Where's our taskmaster? And then I said to them, hey, why don't you warm up for 15 minutes? If you want to walk, walk. If you want to run, run. If you want to sit here and jump rope, we got some jump ropes. And, let's say at 5:30, we'll get started and figure out what it is you'd like to do tonight. And they were very confused. And then I realized at the very end of that training session, I said, look, I'm no longer going to be doing what we're doing. So if you want me to find somebody to help you keep your fitness levels up, I can do that. But I'm going to do this other stuff that I just experienced. And on my way home, because at the time, the way that my brain was functioning, it was always what's called retroactive. So I was on a different timeline. So I didn't realize in the moment that I was being different with them. It occurred to me 25 minutes after class when I was driving home. And I was like, whoa, hold on. I just did my class in a completely different format. And at that point, I was like, oh, my brain is working retroactively. Well, as I continued to keep reducing the lifetime accumulated stress load, my orientation time changed to present-centered future as opposed to present-centered past. And that was a wild experience because before that time, I was always wondering, like, why am I understanding more about experiences the further I get away from them rather than in the moment? And so now I'm shifting psychologically. I'm changing emotionally. I have shifted physiologically and structurally. And then my posture was completely different. So instead of my shoulders being up and back and my chest protruding forward, okay, everything was here and I was down and back. And so I had this very relaxed posture. And I remember I went to this grocery store named Jimbo's in Del Mar, San Diego. And this woman came up to me in the store. She was like, oh, you're just the most peaceful person I've ever met, honey. And I was like, this is too weird. I don't know what's going on because all I ever got before was like, man, you're like the most intense person I've ever met. And so within a 5-day period, I've gone from being projected onto as the most intense person to the most peaceful person that anyone's ever met.
In 5 days?
In 5 days.
So that experience you had with the guy twisting your body, was that a one and done and you were good to go, or you had homework?
That was one and done in terms of working with him, if that's what I wanted. But I think when you've been living in hell long enough, you realize that there's a way out. You want to push the envelope. So I still had all that training from the SEAL team. So I just turned SEAL training into HEAL training. So any
Right.
place in my body where I found discomfort or pain, I just went after it. And that literally became my lifestyle. So 5, 6 hours a day for 7 years, I just had my foot on the gas because I wanted to continue to keep balancing and balancing and rebalancing, because I started to realize my intelligence was increasing. My emotional intelligence was getting higher. My analytical intelligence was getting higher. My brain was functioning much faster. My looks were changing, right? My communication was shifting. And so once you recognize all these things are happening, you just start feeling better and better and better and better and better. And I was getting lighter in my personality. And so I got to the place where I'm from Pennsylvania. I was raised in the Catholic Church. And so I had a lot of Catholic guilt about doing anything that was imperfect. And suddenly I was guilt free. And I was like, are you kidding me? All you have to do is remove tension and stress, and you are no longer labored with guilt any longer. And then people started calling me to receive help. And I was like, okay. And this is a great story because I just I went to Sweden to help this woman 7 days ago. I was at the Olympics working with some athletes and observing them emotionally that I had been helping prepare for the last few years. I went to Sweden to help a friend's mom who was suffering from debilitating back pain. She's been in bed for 17 years.
Oh my gosh.
She has enough energy and she can deal with her pain for no longer than 5 minutes if she's been standing, right? So if she's been up for 5 minutes, her pain is debilitating. So she can basically take a shower, bathe herself every few days, and she can get enough energy to go to the bathroom. But she has to have people who cook for her. Okay, so when I left that place called Kalmar, I had to go back to Paris through Stockholm. So I stopped in Stockholm, and I called a woman that was my first client. And she said to me, it's been 24 years since you did that work on me. She goes, that's been the most profound experience I've ever had my entire life, still to this day. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was just doing to her what he was doing to me. But I didn't really know what was going on. But she was crying and letting go of a lot of emotions. And I was just looking at her like, hey, we're just taking out some tension. I'm not like hurting you. I don't know why you're crying. Like in my mind, I didn't know how to comfort her. I was just sort of shocked that all of this was coming out. And so at that point, she had needed more help when I arrived in Stockholm. And she goes, I don't know how you do it. You arrived at the same exact moment that I was at 24 years ago.
Wow.
And that's how I knew, God's always in charge. And so I just showed up and I helped her. And I just thanked her. I got to say, look, because of you and this experience that I had with you, I decided to make this my life, helping other people. And so I got to 24 years later, return that gift that she gave to me back to her.
That's cool. Cool story.
That was powerful, like full circle moment.
That's amazing. Really neat.
So jumping to but sideways maybe. I wanted you to touch on the difference between stress management and stress resolution. So I think most people are looking for management approaches as opposed to complete resolution approaches. What does that mean to you specifically?
Yeah. There's three categories really. There's stress ignorance, which is where most people are. Okay. And then there's negative stress management tools, which would be nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, pharmaceutical drugs, recreational drugs, food colorings, preservatives, and, addiction, just poor, low functioning behavior. And then there's positive stress management tools. So that would be like stem cells, yoga, breath work, any form of exercise, meditation, and then there's stress resolution. And so I think it's great that people can, now there's this whole sector of society, there's this whole niche that's been developed around positive stress management. But when my mom was a kid and she was dealing with her stress, there were no positive stress management tools besides prayer, right? You could go see a therapist and you could talk, but if you were in a community in Pennsylvania, a small town, and you were going to see a psychologist, everybody thought you were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so nobody wanted that as part of their image, right? So if you were going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist, it was under wraps. And so because my mom didn't have anything to help her, she had been sexually abused. She was raped when she was 13 years old. And they gave her electric shock therapy.
Oh my God.
Right. As part of her treatment plan. So, I mean, imagine that, like, you have the shock of that experience and now you're going to put more shock in my system. And so fast forward, 2024, this is this would be 61 years later from her receiving her electric shock therapy to now there's breath work, meditation, yoga, Reiki, all these other systems that you can engage in order to start to reduce some of this stress that you have. But what you really need in order to get into stress resolution are very powerful tools, right? Tools that create instantaneous permanent change. So after I started learning and engaging in this practice, I was at a grocery store, Jimbo's, and one of the girls that went to the same gym that I went to in Solana Beach called Frogs, she was dealing with hip pain, and I told her her only solution, and she was only 34 years old. She was like, well, I'm supposed to have an operation on Friday, and it was Wednesday. She's like, they're going to give me a hip replacement. I was like, no. I tell you what, you can come to my office. I'm not even going to charge you, okay? I will work on you and make sure that pain reduces. So I called up one of my buddies who I'd been working with and said, hey, man, can you come up here and help me? And he's like, yeah, we worked on her for 4 hours. I saw her years later, right, at the grocery store again. And I said, how are things going? She goes, I haven't had any pain in my hip since. And so that's when I understood that the changes that I was creating based on the forces that I was using was instantaneous and it was permanent. Because in order to create permanent change, you have to also change behavior, right? So if you, in traditional Chinese medicine, when you look at channels, each one of those channels has a particular level of consciousness that's attached to it. So when you have highly stressed tissue, you have a highly stressed aspect of your consciousness. So let's say instead of being empowered, you're disempowered. Instead of being open-minded, you're closed-minded. Instead of being honest, you're dishonest. Instead of being passionately engaged, you're depressed, right? So you just go onto the flip side. Well, once I reduced all that tension and stress and distortion out of her spleen channel, which is the spleen is what controls hip health and hip function, she moved from sacrificing herself in this relationship she was with this guy to communicating clearly what her desires, wants, and needs were, right? So if I'm engaging in powerful, high-functioning behavior, then my body's no longer accumulating the tension, the stress, and the distortion that I was from my behavior. So the way that I'm thinking, the way that I'm breathing, and the way that I'm behaving is as important as anything else that I'm doing in my life. So if we can create credible change in the way that you're going about your business in your life, meaning if we open up your channel for communication and you start communicating to your own benefit, then there's no need for your spleen to be stressed. So you're no longer attracted to substances like sugar that are going to cause your body to hold on to certain levels of inflammation, and then you're not going to endure the kind of structural distortion that's going to get created by drying out all of your tissues. And so when we change the body, we change the behavior. When we change the behavior, we change the course of someone's life. So whatever's going on in your body is reflected back to you in the way that you function and behave in your life. And so once I realized the psychological benefits and that we could create instantaneous permanent change, I recruited anyone who would listen to be able to help them deal with the things that at the time were unsolvable, right? And this is 24, 25 years ago.
So what is a practical example of a tool?
So
like that woman. So that woman that you helped, what exactly were you doing?
Yeah, so exactly what we were doing. So in order to open the spleen channel, she was lying on her back, right? And so I had my friend hold below her knee and above her knee to the inside, okay, of her leg. And then I pulled her opposite leg, her left leg, out to the side, okay? So imagine her left leg's out here, her right leg is straight. He's holding here, okay? I have her squeezing and pulling in. Okay, so now she's squeezing, slight bend in her knee so that the tissue's activated, the musculature, and she's squeezing in. And I'm going to do that until that tissue is supremely warmed up. Now we've got massive amount of concentric contractional force, right? The first rep she pulled in, there was hardly any force at all. By the time we got to like the 6th or the 7th rep, she had full contraction. Once she has full contraction, now she's going to take in a breath. I'm going to have her keep squeezing in for about 4 seconds. And then I'm going to slowly beat her force. As long as she's squeezing in with full force and she can feel all the tension that's being removed in the belly of the muscle, we're good. The second she starts to slip, meaning she no longer feels the sensation 100% in the belly of the muscle, then I get her to start to pull back in again. So now we're using isometric, concentric, and eccentric contractions to change bone rotational relationships. So once that tissue lengthened enough, her thigh, her femur, was free from being stuck to her hip socket because we created space in the muscle. Once you created space in the muscle, that created flexibility and more space in and around the joint. And then she got up and she walked around and she didn't have any pain. Now I went back and forth for hours, right? I softened up her tissue first, right? I was walking. Her pain level when I first got on was a 10 out of 10. I got her down to neutral. So same exact thing that I was doing before. And now she has no discomfort. She doesn't have any pleasure, but she doesn't have any pain. So you have tissue health and you have structural health. So once I change the tissue health, there's no way for the structure to go back once I change the structure. But if I open up and change her structure, but her tissue health is still toxic, okay? Well, what's going to happen? The unhealthy tissue is going to pull the structure right back out of balance. So I started putting none of this information was in a book, right? I had to start to really go in and start to understand what was really going on. And then I basically used everyone like a guinea pig, right? And I was guinea pigging from 7 a.m. till 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Like Monday through Sunday, because I finally found something I was really passionate about that would allow me to use my own brilliance to be able to resolve and bring solutions for people. And then I was on fire. And so my whole life went from me being focused on me to being seen as a really amazing athlete to never caring what people thought about me in terms of my image, to using all of my life force in order to be able to create instantaneous permanent change for people that were suffering needlessly. There's literally no reason to have pain in your body. There's no good reason. Okay, if you have blunt force trauma, yes, but that can be resolved, okay? But there's no need for anyone to be walking around with a stiff back or stiff neck or stiff shoulders or frozen shoulder syndrome or lumbar issues. There's no need for that. And once you understand the mechanics of how to remove and reduce your lifetime accumulated stress load, but to reduce your tension load and to change the distortion levels between your bones, there's literally no need to be walking around in pain. And I was someone who, my whole body was full of pain. This is 24 years later. I never have any pain in my system. And I'm someone who I ran my motor hot, right? What does that mean? I slept very little and I worked constantly, right? And I ate here and there. And still, my body's extremely comfortable.
That's amazing. Well, so you have a book.
Yeah.
Is your book called True Body Intelligence?
It's called Free for Life.
Free for Life. So in the book, do you guide through these techniques for people?
I inform in the last third what the techniques are so people can understand the systems, right? Because when I wrote the book, I didn't write the book for the public. I wrote the book for Major League Baseball owners and managers, NFL, NHL, soccer, and basketball, and the NBA. I went to this workshop and this guy said to me, hey, why don't you release it to the public too? Because at the time I wanted to work, I'm from Pennsylvania. I wanted to work with the Philadelphia Eagles. right? Because I'm a Penn State fan, I'm a Philadelphia team fan, and I had a different agenda for the book. So I wrote the book to inform. So these managers would be able to read the book and go, okay, I've never heard of these things. I think this guy could help our teams perform better.
Got it.
And then the book got released for the public. And so it was just information, right? It wasn't there for me to train their trainers and teach them the techniques, because with techniques like this, you need actual instruction.
So do you have like an online course? Like, how does somebody work with you?
No. How does somebody work with me? They find me somehow. I don't know how they find me. Typically, I just get a message from my assistant. Hey, you have this onboarding call with this woman, Susie, Tuesday night. And I'm like, okay. And then they're like, well, I was at a grocery store and I'm from Florida, and I ran into this woman. She had these kids, and she started, talking about you, and I got your book and read it, and I know my daughter's suffering from da 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 da. Would you be able to? And I'm just like, okay, look, this is how it works, and boom. And then we figure out a way for us to be in each other's presence and to start to rewire their nervous system, right? And once we rewire their body, their brain, and the nervous system, I then teach them on the 5th day. So they're never relying on me, because one of the things that I feel is the most important thing is that other people can do good things for you, but you have to be involved in some measure, right? If you're not involved, you're not taking responsibility. And so I teach everyone a 15-minute program that they can utilize every day. They check in with me every day. I have people that have checked in with me for 9 years every single day after they've done their 15-minute thing. And to this day, everything in their life is working perfectly, and all the pain that they have, that they've never had again.
That's really cool. Okay. There's so much more. Like, you're going to have to come back on, because I had other questions, but I've run out of time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So what is one thing that you would like the listener to know?
I think the most important thing is for them to find as many people like you as they can to be able to help them, and to be extremely honest about their discomfort. I had discomfort and I wasn't honest. I was dishonest. If I had let people in when I had my first level of pain and discomfort and sought after people, I may have made my dream come true and get to the Olympic trials and have a shot at making an Olympic team. But because I was silent and I suffered in silence, I never got the help that I needed. And there's lots of people that are suffering from childhood physical abuse, childhood emotional abuse, childhood sexual abuse, or people who had parents who were passive aggressive, or people who had parents that had abandoned them in any way, or kids that didn't have enough food to eat. Like, whatever your thing was, and everyone had a thing, talk to somebody about it. Like, invite somebody into your life. Like, it's one thing to sit on the call and to listen to people like you and I. And by the way, thank you for what you and Tripp are doing in the world.
Well, thank you, Christopher.
But ultimately, people need to let somebody in. They need to take a little bit of a risk and say, hey, I've got this thing going on. I got like a toothache, okay? And I need some help. Like, if you have a neck ache or a backache, or you have like really intense menstrual cramps, or your sleep is poor, you're having these intermittent headaches or these anger outbursts, like, as soon as you have your first symptom, you need to go find somebody. Like, ask somebody in your community if they know anyone who will help you, because there's so many tools out there now. You could literally get on YouTube and get a PhD in learning how to help yourself. Okay? Right. There's a lot of free information out there. That wasn't out there when you and I were teenagers. None of that information was available. Okay. Most of it wasn't even created yet. And so now we're in this really wonderful time in the world. So 1, be super honest with yourself. 2, obviously, if you live in America, you eat an American diet, at some point you need to clean out your liver. That is an absolute must. Okay. And, find someone out there, find some naturopath or someone who can guide you into cleaning up your liver and get that functioning really, really well. And if you're communicating what your own desires, wants, and needs are, you're in good shape. But I think the most important thing of all these things is write down a list of the 5 things you feel guilty about and the 5 things you're most shameful of. And call one of your friends, call one of your relatives, Or look, if you're uncomfortable with that, call a professional and sit down and let someone in on your guilt and your shame. And if you can dump your guilt and your shame, you can start to communicate what your real needs are to your community, and you can clean up your liver, and you're being super honest inwardly and outwardly, you're going to live a good life. Like, your body's going to be able to start to sort itself out. Because once you start suppressing these secrets, they start creating secretions and creating more dramatic situations that cause even more dramatic responses. And so the way to get out of that is to interfere with the pattern. And that's to let people know what's going on the inside that you're suffering from and put it on the outside. Because in that position, you put yourself in a position of receptivity. And when you're in receptivity, you can receive love, you can receive care, you can receive guidance, you can receive help. And without that, you're trying to do it all on your own. And look, we have 8 billion people on this planet because we need everyone to help you in any way that they can. And we need people like you. We need people like Chip. We need people like me. And we're here. So utilize us.
Cool. Do you have a website?
I have a website, truebodyintelligence.com.
Cool. Listener, I'll have that in the notes. This was awesome. I think I could just hang out with you all day, but I know you probably got like a life to live. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. I know I'm going to want to have you back because I can get to half of the things I wanted to ask you about.
Great. Yeah, I mean, we can. I mean, I like being in both of your presence, and I love that download that Tripp gave me. And, you know, when you're with people that are in the same lane, like for me, nothing's more exciting. Right? Like, we can start bouncing things off of each other. I'm getting great ideas. I didn't get to hear Tripp's story. I didn't get to hear your story why you're in what you're in. Mm-hmm. You know, that stuff feeds me. You know, I can't imagine anything more important to me in my life than doing what I'm doing.
Very cool. All right, listener, hope you found this educational, informational, somewhat entertaining. And until next time.
Thanks for subscribing to Your Infinite Health. I'm Dr. Tripp.
And I'm LeNae. Until next time, feel it, look it, and live it.